Welcome, everyone. I'm Jordan from Folia Health, and thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started, I just wanted to give you some background on Folia. So, we are a comprehensive app where you can track everything you want for autoimmune and for other chronic conditions. That includes symptoms, treatments, diet, exercise, stress levels, daily activities, and more. So we're free to use. And if you opt into research, then we'll actually pay you for regularly tracking. And that's just tracking your health. So Folia was inspired by our founder, Nell's mom, who diligently tracked her brother's rare condition, CVID. It was actually through this tracking where she was really being so diligent about, like, he's getting an infusion. Is it gonna, like, how are his symptoms having, like, what are they doing after that infusion? And she realized that his infusions, though his symptoms were still appearing, his infusions were working. It was just that the frequency at which he was getting those infusions wasn't quite enough. And so she took that data and her, like, it was a journal, so it was like a notebook. She took that into the doctor and was like, hey, this is what's going on. And they actually were able to adjust his treatment from there so that he was able to live without symptom or with less symptoms. So Folia is kind of the digital version of what Nell's mom was doing. And it's really a way to just let you kind of unload everything that you're keeping track of in your mind. So that way you can just focus on living and healing. And it'll also give you some trends and insights about your health. And the more that you track, the more trends and insights that you'll see. So with that kind of leads us into our main topic today, debunking autoimmune diet myths, what truly matters for your health. We are so thrilled to have Genny Mack with us today. She's a holistic nutritionist, autoimmune wellness coach, and lupus warrior dedicated to helping individuals reclaim their health naturally. She specializes in gut health, natural remedies, and anti-inflammatory nutrition. And for those of you who did submit your questions ahead of time, thank you so much for doing so. Genny has done her best to work as many of those into her presentation as possible today. And there's also, you should see like a live chat option. And so if you have any questions that come up today or anything you want to ask Genny, please do put those in the chat and we'll have some time at the end for those questions. So with that, I will hand it over to Genny.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Folia Health, for giving me this platform and this opportunity to talk about this very important topic, autoimmune diseases and nutrition. And whew, I know together that combination is a big question mark for many of us in the autoimmune community, which is why we wanted to talk about this today. So let me go ahead and share my screen. I want to check in with everyone. Can you see my screen? Let me know, and feel free to use the chat box. I would love your engagement, your conversations. Let me know where you're tuning in from and what brings you here today, because we're going to get into it. We're going to have a very good discussion on autoimmune diets and all the myths. I'm here to answer as many questions as I can in the next 55 or so minutes. And let's get into it. Okay, so Ayana says, yup. Okay. Yes. All right, let's get right into it. Okay, so again, feel free to tap into the chat box, but I want to hear from you. Have you ever tried an autoimmune diet and felt overwhelmed? Yes. Hi from Colorado. Yes. Okay. And if so, let me know which autoimmune diet you have tried. And what has that overwhelming feeling been? Because I have a lot to share with my own personal story, living with an autoimmune disease and becoming a holistic nutritionist to educate our community on how we should nourish our bodies. Yes. Miss Real Food. Okay, we're going to talk about all of that today. And I'm going to try to click back and forth in the chat, so hopefully I don't miss anything. Yes, balance. Balance is key. Is it the same as an anti-inflammatory diet? Yes, that is a type of autoimmune diet. Yes, keep the chat coming in. Yep. So we're going to talk about kidney health and sodium. Yep, gluten-free, dairy-free, and it could be very stressful. Exactly. Okay, so tell me now, what's the hardest part about eating for your health? What's the hardest part about eating for your health? I know early on in my journey, the hardest part for me, again, as someone living with an autoimmune disease, I was diagnosed with lupus. The hardest thing for me was, what can I eat? There was a lot of talk about what I shouldn't eat, but what could I eat? All of the things that I loved when I grew up were on the list of foods that I couldn't eat, right? So someone says trying to get all the protein in, the nutrients, the vitamins in one meal. I hear you. Remembering what is good and what is not. Wow. Changing habits. Absolutely. The hardest part is having a meal plan, right? And then reacting what to you eat when you eat out. All good things, all good things. All right, so you're probably here, as it also sounds in the chat, is because you tried many different diets. You've tried supplements too, but nothing feels quite right. You're looking for a sustainable, natural approach to reduce pain, bloating, fatigue, and support your healing. And you're also here because you know the goal isn't about a perfect diet, it's about a personalized approach that works for you, which is why I am here today. Okay, so a little bit about my story. My name is Genny Mack, and I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, lupus, systemic lupus, kidney lupus or lupus nephritis in 2017. And my journey to holistic wellness started in the doctor's office when I asked the rheumatologist what I should eat. And the rheumatologist's response was, eat whatever you want, just take your medication. And I knew that wasn't the truth. I knew deep down inside, intuitively, which is probably why you're here today, that food plays an important role in our overall wellness. So that led me on a journey to holistic nutrition. And I went into remission for about 3 years, using food as medicine, adopting a holistic lifestyle, focused on movement, managing stress, sleep. And I went into remission for a few years. And then what happened? COVID came. COVID came and changed all of our lives. And in 2023, I went back into a lupus flare, and it was more severe, right? The flare this time was more severe. I went into the hospital for 12 emergency room visits, and I was in the hospital, in and out of the hospital for 4.5 months. I didn't recognize myself. I lost 1/3 my body weight, which was 45 pounds, and I could barely eat. And that pushed me to try all of these different diets to eat. And I found through food, through intuition, through mindset, all of these shifts, and through faith, right? All of these shifts help my body heal itself, right? So I went from hospitalized, bedridden, sick, and in debilitating pain to being nourished. And this is me just a little over a year and a half later. I just completed the Lupus Foundation of America walk, and I felt so good in my body. More energy, more mental clarity, and this is what brings me here today. I became a certified holistic nutritionist specializing in autoimmune health to help individuals just like you reclaim their health through whole body healing so that you can glow, live a life of abundance, and live flare-free. And before we get into the juiciness of this discussion tonight, I just want to provide a disclaimer, right? That this is based on my experience and my knowledge as a holistic nutritionist. Any information that I share is not medical advice or treatment. Always consult with your doctor because significant diet changes can have an impact on your overall wellness, especially if you're taking medications or if you're pregnant. All right. Now, time to get into the agenda. And before we do, I just want to hear from you again. What is one thing that you're looking forward to in our discussion today? Again, feel free to use the chat box. I received many of your questions, which I tried to incorporate in this presentation tonight. But if there's anything specific that you would like to know, use that chat. Use that chat. Okay, so here are some of the topics that we're going to discuss on this evening with Folia Health. Thank you for having me here. We're going to talk about autoimmune health and diet, right? Then we're going to talk about popular autoimmune diets and their challenges. Remember, we talked about debunking autoimmune diets, right? And if you could get a vibe here already, there's no one-size-fits-all approach, which is what we're going to get into today. Then we're going to get into the root cause of autoimmune flare-ups. There are so many factors, right? Our DNA, our epigenetics that we hear, but what does that mean from a nutritional standpoint, right? So someone said they want to hear about figuring out to use nutrition to help heal the body. Absolutely. And that's why we're going to talk about practical steps for balanced nutrition, abundant eating. That is my approach to working with the community. And then we'll open it up to any questions that you have. Okay? All right. So an estimated 50 million Americans alone, right? If you live outside of America, this number is more, are living with an autoimmune disease, right? I'm one of them. And on an average, with lupus specifically, 8 or 9 out of 10 individuals living with lupus are women. And then majority of those women, 2/3 of those women living with lupus are women of color from the BIPOC community, right? So lots of questions there, which is why I do the work that I do. And then let's talk about the relationship between diet and autoimmune health, which is why you're here tonight. What we eat plays a powerful role in how we feel. Nutrition is fundamental to how we feel. Nutrition is food. Nutrition is fuel for our bodies. The same way that gas is fuel for a car, right? So a Mediterranean style diet is often associated with better health and improved outcomes for chronic conditions such as autoimmune diseases. And just baseline approach, which is what I want to do, is spend very little time on what we shouldn't do because it's about what we should do with our nutrition. What we shouldn't do is eat ultra processed foods, right? Because those can throw off the balance in our bodies, leading to chronic symptoms like bloating, fatigue, pain, and more frequent flare-ups. Does anyone suffer from these symptoms? Right? Pain, frequent fatigue, bloating, and frequent flare-ups. I absolutely know what it feels like to go through these symptoms. And again, this is why nutrition is so important. Absolutely. So someone said they want direction on how not to feel starving in the evening. Let's talk about it. Because nutrition, again, plays a fundamental role in preventing inflammatory and immune-mediated diseases. In simple terms, nutrition is key to how our bodies feel, right? Underscoring that. Now let's talk about what is the Mediterranean diet. And the reason why I'm sharing this as a baseline is because the Mediterranean diet has been well researched for chronic disease prevention. Have any of us heard about the Mediterranean diet or followed the Mediterranean diet? The Mediterranean diet focuses on a balanced anti-inflammatory approach inspired by Mediterranean countries. So it emphasizes whole nutrient-dense foods, fruits and vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts and seeds, healthy fats, lean protein. And the underscore of this way of eating is to reduce inflammatory and highly processed foods. So limiting red meat and processed foods, avoiding refined sugars, excess salt, right? So this way of eating has been researched and studied. But this is what I want to underscore in this discussion. Before the Mediterranean diet, there were traditional ways of eating that came before. We have the African diet, indigenous diets, Asian food pathways that have focused on nutrient-rich and anti-inflammatory foods, such as greens, grains, tubers, and fermented foods. The Mediterranean diet is just one way of eating, and know that there are many cultures that have gut healing, whole food traditions based on local and ancestral ways of eating. So why is this important? Because healing is not about a perfect diet, right? It's about finding what's important to you, right? What nourishes your body best. Okay? And then I also want to talk about the gut and immune system connection. And a question for the audience: do we know that 70 to 80% of our immune system lives in our gut? Do we know that? And if not, I am here to tell you again how important the gut is in relation to our immune system, right? Autoimmune conditions are inflammatory conditions, and inflammation can be manifesting within our immune systems, right? So if 70 to 80% of our immune system lives in our gut, then what's important? Nutrition, right? So research shows that gut health plays a key role in regulating inflammation. If we look at this diagram to the right, this shows the difference between a leaky gut and a normal gut. Have we heard about what is a leaky gut? That is basically when the walls aren't closed tightly, right? The junctures of the gut are open, which means that healthy food doesn't stay within the system. And then that also means that bad bacteria and pathogens and infections can enter in the system a little bit easier, right? So that is a simple way of describing a leaky gut. And a leaky gut can trigger symptoms like joint pain, bloating, fatigue, brain fog, and skin flare-ups, right? Some of us have already mentioned that we deal with these symptoms daily, which can correlate very directly to our gut health. Okay, so again, another reason why nutrition is important. This diagram here shows a study with individuals that was diagnosed with lupus, SLE, and it showed the correlation between the gut microbiome and disease activity. So if you look at this chart here on the right, you could see that there's a direct correlation with a leaky gut, as we just described, and higher lupus disease activity. Isn't that fascinating? There is a direct correlation on the health of our gut in relation to our disease activity. So what does that go back to? Focusing on our gut health and nutrition. Now, I want to know, which autoimmune diets have you tried? And what has been your experience with these diets? Some of you already mentioned anti-inflammatory diets, AIP diets. Are there any other diets that you have tried? And if so, what has been your experience? Because we're going to get into some specifics around different autoimmune diets and the impact. Yes. And as I mentioned early on in my healing journey, I tried many autoimmune diets, which I'm going to describe here. And while a lot of these diets focus on eating foods that what is considered as anti-inflammatory, it really is about helping to balance the immune system, right? Not triggering the immune system to be overactive or too underactive. So that's why a lot of these diets have been devised in that way to help balance the immune system and also digestion. Okay, so someone mentioned low residual diet when having IBS flares. Absolutely understood. Okay. All right, so here are some popular autoimmune diets. We have the autoimmune protocol diet, which is, I would say, probably one of the most popular diets. There are many other diets out there, but the AIP diet is designed to heal the gut by removing foods believed to trigger immune reactions. We're going to talk about it more. Then there's the paleo diet that focuses on whole foods while eliminating grains, legumes, and dairy. The keto diet focuses on a high-fat approach, getting the body into ketosis so that the blood sugar is stabilized. And that is a way to reduce inflammation. Low-FODMAP diets, which is also very popular in the autoimmune diet community, is because it limits fermentable carbs, right? So a lot of foods have a lot of carbohydrates, especially complex carbohydrates, contain compounds like polysaccharides. That is a type of starch, that is a type of sugar that when you consume it, it can cause fermentation, thus exacerbating digestive discomfort. So this is popular for individuals that have IBS or SIBO, for example. And then we have the Goodbye Lupus Protocol, also known as the green smoothie diet, also known as the hypernourishment diet. And this follows a raw plant-based approach emphasizing hydration and cellular healing, right? Some people said, I have feared diets until now. It's time and I want to do it right. Absolutely. Yep, some people said they haven't done a diet and stuck with it, right? So you've done both. Okay. All right, now let's talk about the AIP diet just a bit more. So the AIP diet, the autoimmune protocol diet, again, very popular in the autoimmune community. It's a structured approach to temporarily remove common triggers. But healing isn't about avoiding food forever, which is what I want to underscore in this presentation. The goal isn't about perfection, it's about understanding your body. So what's interesting is that Sarah Ballantyne, who is a doctor, created this protocol years ago. But actually, Sarah Ballantyne has evolved her approach to focus on this diet called Nutrivore, which focuses on nutrient density, not elimination. Right? And that is what I totally am behind, is focusing on a way of eating that focuses on nutrient density, identifying the root cause of your sickness, and sustainability. But I want to say here, right, in fairness, because again, the AIP diet has helped many people, I'm sure millions. But if elimination works for you, that is great. Right? But if it leaves you more stressed, somebody mentioned feeling hungry, especially at night, fearful of food, it might be time to shift to an abundant healing approach instead, which is what we're going to talk more about tonight. How do we feel about that approach for our healing journey? I want to hear from you in the chat. Does this sound like something that you want to adopt on your autoimmune healing journey, focused on eating that is nutrient dense, that's nourishing and stress-free and satiating, right? Right. Yes, we're going to talk about it. Absolutely. I see the yeses coming in the chat. Yes, it's about shifting that mindset of abundance and healing and listening to the body, right? Listening to that intuition that is inside of you. Okay, so why elimination diets don't work for all? Short-term use. Elimination diets can help pinpoint food sensitivities and reduce inflammation. And elimination diets can be beneficial for specific conditions. We talked about SIBO, gut healing, histamine intolerance. But autoimmune diets are not permanent solutions, right? We don't want to focus on long-term restrictions because that can create imbalances. That can create imbalances in nutrient density in our bodies, right? Are we getting the right vitamins and minerals for our body from an energy level? Many people with autoimmune conditions experience symptoms like chronic fatigue, right? And that could be from nutritional deficiencies, right? Nutritional deficiencies can be the cause of systemic imbalances. So, how about we adopt an abundant approach, right? So, instead of fear based restriction, we focus on adding nutrient dense and healing foods that support gut and immune function. Yes, absolutely. Someone said healing the digestive tract so that it can absorb nutrients better. That's right. That is right. Okay. So, what I just talked about, right, is not meant to criticize autoimmune diets. Many people find relief through structured eating approaches, and there's research to support the benefits, right? But everyone's nutritional needs are different. And there are baseline principles to nourishing the body. That should say nourishing. So let's talk about what is the true root cause. Are we ready to get into this? I hope you all are taking notes. I hope you're taking notes. If this is probably one of the most important slides in this presentation because it is very important for us to identify the true root cause of our digestive distress. Right? And it's focused on these areas. And once we understand the root cause of our digestive distress, we can, one, make more intentional purchases with our food, right? We can create more intentional habits with how we're consuming food. And then we can start to feel a difference in our body, right? Once we do all of that, how do we source our food? All of these are important questions and topics to consider with consumption. Okay, so what is the true root cause? One, food allergies and sensitivities. All right, so important. How many of us have seen an allergist or a GI doctor? And how many of us know if we have food allergies or sensitivities? Let me know in the chat. How many of us know if we have food allergies or sensitivities? Somebody says, I do. Someone says gluten. Right. This is so incredibly important on our healing journey. And what I want to stress here is that food allergies are most likely something that your body needs to stick with forever. All right, I'll explain more. So if you have a food allergy, it can be something that you're born with, an intolerance to certain food groups. And I would say if you have a food allergy, it's best to stay away from that food, right? But then if you have food sensitivities or intolerances, what I want to stress here is that can actually be temporary. Food allergies and sensitivities can come if you have, let's say, a high level of antibodies in your immune system. And if you eat certain foods, your body creates these immune reactions, right? And it creates antibodies, which can cause sensitivities or intolerances. But there can be root causes as to why you have these sensitivities or intolerances, right? Remember, food allergies stick. If you have an allergy, avoid the food. But if you have an intolerance or sensitivity, that can actually change over time once you begin to heal your gut. All right, so this is why it's very important to focus on nutrient density, healing that gut, repairing the gut lining so that your body begins to digest foods to create digestive enzymes to break down the food and doesn't trigger an immune response, right? And then overactive immune system, we talked about that a bit. Gut imbalances, we talked about a leaky gut, right? A permeated gut lining. Bacteria growth and infections. How many of us have been tested for infections? Underlying infections to understand the root cause of our autoimmune conditions. Very complex, right? Autoimmune conditions are multifactorial diseases, meaning that our DNA can trigger or can be a sort of a number one basis for an autoimmune diagnosis, but then our epigenetics or our environment can actually trigger the onset of the autoimmune disease, right? So this is why it's very important for us to understand what's happening in our environment, not just externally, but internally. So getting tested for different infections, bacteria overgrowth, right? Some of us have been told that we have H. pylori if we have SIBO infections, for example. But just getting an understanding if you have underlying pathogenic infections, viruses, bacteria, fungal infections, etc., parasites that can actually be causing imbalances in your system. And then difficulty processing foods. Again, if we have a leaky gut, maybe fermented foods are a bit too much for our digestive system. Histamine intolerances, right? Some foods can cause a histamine reaction, fermentable foods. Maybe, again, we have a leaky gut because our system is fighting other infections. So we have difficulties processing foods. And then metabolic conditions, so important for us to get our complete metabolic panel, to look at our lipid panel, to look at our A1C levels. How is our body digesting food? How is that food impacting our blood sugar, right? Do we have insulin sensitivity or resistance? Type 2 diabetes, thyroid imbalances, that can all impact the way that you digest food. And then exposure to pesticides. This is where it gets complicated, right? Because say we have completely given up processed foods, right? Or mostly given up, right? It's hard to completely give it up. But mostly we have given up eating processed foods. We're eating healthy foods, but we're still getting sick, right? We're still feeling bloated, joint pain and inflammation, right? This is where the dieting gets tricky, and it's really about understanding the food system. Our food system has substantially changed, even over the past decade, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And if we talk about modern wheat specifically, that has changed. Wheat has completely been genetically modified, and genetically modified foods, why are they sort of tricky for our body is because our body looks at those foods as foreign substances, which is then going to impact our immune system, right, and cause an inflammatory response. So that's why it's difficult to process genetically modified food or hybridized food. And then dairy specifically, the way that it has been modernized can be inflammatory. There's something called molecular mimicry, meaning that there's this compound in dairy called casein. So when you consume casein, and if you have an autoimmune condition, it can mimic the body's hormonal system and can cause an inflammatory response. So that's why dairy can be very triggering, for example. And this all goes back to the way that our farming and food practices have changed. And then also, along with that, a lot of foods are sprayed with pesticides, right? So it's important to we're going to talk about it a bit more, but understanding the source of your food is also going to be very important in your healing journey. All right. I know that was a lot there, and you could probably sense my passion here, but it really is about getting to the root cause of our food intolerances so that we can make the right decision for our eating, for our health. I hope that was helpful. All right, so again, food allergies and sensitivities, it's important to know this. I would say go see an allergist or a GI doctor if you haven't already. An allergy can be very severe, so you want to sort of eliminate that food group. But sensitivities and tolerances can change. Once you begin to focus on healing your gut, supporting your digestive system, you might be able to tolerate more foods. There are some common triggers here. We talked about dairy, eggs can be triggering, gluten we talked about, soy as well, peanuts, tree nuts, fish, and sesame. All right. So how do we navigate autoimmune nutrition without fear? Right? We just talked about it. Get tested. You want to check for allergies, intolerances, sensitivities, but you also want to check for nutritional deficiencies. Vitamin D is so important to help regulate our hormones. B12 to give us energy to help us absorb iron. So see your primary care physician, your GI doctor, your allergist to get tested. And then we want to source organically. Organic isn't just a trendy word, right? We want to understand the source of our food. Shop the freshest way possible. Does anyone shop at their local farmer's market, by the way? Right? Shopping at your local farmer's market, I understand access isn't always available, right? So working with what resources you have, and maybe you don't have access to organic. This is where you wash your produce thoroughly. For example, baking soda. There was a study to show that baking soda can actually take off about 80% of the pesticides for produce, right? So baking soda is very helpful. Yes, someone said, I love mine. Awesome. And then we're going to practice mindful eating. Yes, slowing down, chewing our food thoroughly, paying attention to how food makes you feel. That's how we're going to take control of our health, eating mindfully and intentionally. Does anyone journal their ways of eating, reflecting, right? You have your notebook. Maybe there's an opportunity to do it tonight, right? If you haven't eaten dinner yet, or if you just have eaten dinner, journal about it, right? Journal about what you ate, how that food made you feel, and any insights there. What I want to talk about very briefly is to also understand the transit time of food, right? I'm not going to get in it too much, but I want to lightly touch on it to say that there are different food groups that digest quicker than others, right? So for example, fruits digest very quickly versus protein like red meat or pork. It might take between 8 hours to 72 hours for the body to digest. So even being mindful of different foods and the transit time for digestion can be a game changer to improve your digestive system. And if your body needs a little bit of extra help, you can support your body with digestive enzymes, probiotic supplements, right? Although I recommend getting your probiotics from food like kimchi, sauerkraut, yogurt, kefir, right? Maybe you need a little bit more support. This is why it's important to work with a certified holistic nutritionist or a dietitian that can help you specifically on your journey. And most importantly, we want to focus on what you can eat. Again, a lot of these diets out here focus on foods that we can eat. And while that is important, there are so many different foods out there. In general, there are over 20,000 species of plants, right? And those species have subspecies of fruits. And then there are different plants that exist depending on the region, where you are in the world. If you live in a more tropical climate, right? As someone mentioned here earlier, then there are more tropical foods. So this is why it's important for us to focus on eating what grows locally because you're going to get a denser produce that has more nutrients, vitamins, and minerals that our body desires. Okay? And then what should we eat instead, right? Taking a balanced approach. This is a chart from the Harvard School that really talks about focusing on diversity, right? So you want to focus on colors to get your different vitamins and minerals and nutrients, but then you want to focus on making sure you're getting the different food groups every day. They play a very important role to synthesize our body's digestive system, respiratory system, all of the different functions in our body. Different vitamins and minerals play a key role in regulating those, right? So carbs are going to help for your energy and your metabolism. Protein is also going to help for energy and cellular repair and strong muscles to protect your bones. Your fats are going to help you reduce inflammation. And do we know that our brain is actually 60% fat? Which is why omega-3s are so important for brain health, right? If we're experiencing symptoms like brain fog, this is where healthy fats come into play. So it's just not about the carbs, the protein, and the fat. It's about the nutrients. So again, getting tested to look at your nutritional profile, understanding what nutrients you might be deficient in, and focusing on getting those nutrients. All right? How do we build a balanced plate? Again, focusing on carbohydrates, protein, and fats. Those are the different food groups that we should focus on eating every day. And then depending on your individual needs, again, understanding the root cause of your imbalances, then you make adjustments along the way. But all of these nutrients play a key role in regulating our systems and our bodily functions. And in summary, there's no one magic formula, right? Individuality matters. There are specific baseline principles as we talk about, but sustainable eating patterns are greater than elimination diets. It's about long-term success for a consistent approach, and it's not about perfection. Again, it's about consistency. And I want to share with you an anti-inflammatory turmeric paste recipe. This has been downloaded many times by my community. There is direct research to show the benefits of turmeric, right? Turmeric, again, is not for everybody. Everyone has their own individual needs. But turmeric is a very popular sort of medicinal culinary spice and an herb that's been used for ancestors and centuries by our ancestors, including in traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, and you could use this paste in golden milk, smoothies, and a shot in your yogurt. Highly recommend to download it. And just a few more slides here before I actually open it up to any more questions. Folia Health, again, if you haven't downloaded the app, please take a look at Folia Health. It's a free app to help you track your health, right? We talked about journaling and tracking your symptoms, including your eating consumption, the different foods that you're taking in, and how that food makes you feel. This is a great way to track it, and you can earn gifts and rewards by tracking your health. You get scanned to download here with the QR codes. And I also want to offer, I'm having a autoimmune nutrition masterclass where we're going to talk about the details of what I call an abundant eating approach to focus on reducing inflammation without extreme eliminations. It's happening March 18th. And because you are with the Folia community, I'm giving you $33 off this masterclass. And if you type in the code EATGOOD33, then you'll get $33 off. But this expires on Friday. So check it out as soon as you can. And then I just want to say and ask the community, from tonight's discussion, I want to hear from you. What's one small change that you can make to nourish your body better. Just one change, one small change that you would like to make to nourish your body better. And maybe that is being more mindful of your hydration. Yes, mindful eating, right? Mindful eating can be cooking your dinner for the night. That can be a first step. It can be sitting at the table and eating your food and chewing it thoroughly. So, our chewing is part of our digestive system. When we chew, our mouth is actually creating digestive enzymes to break down the food, right? Someone said minimize red meat intake. Yes, absolutely. Again, it's about balance, but maybe, heavy meat consumption might be difficult for you if your digestive system has stagnation, right? Or if you have kidney involvement, which requires your kidneys to filter protein, sodium, and different fluids. So you want to support your kidney in a way of helping it not work so hard, right? So you minimize the hard to process proteins, you monitor your hydration, and you minimize your sodium intake, right? So that's a good example of a small change that you can make today. And for me, I want to get more in sync with eating along the circadian rhythm, meaning when the sun rises, I start my day with hydration and nourishing my body. And then when the sun sets, I focus on eating my last meal around the time so that my body can focus on rest and digest. So that's one small change that I'm looking forward to making this season, especially with the spring changes, right? It's feeling near to spring. I'm in the Bronx in New York. So I have the opportunity to enjoy dinner just a touch later, right? So after this presentation, I'll focus on eating my last meal for the day. And then journaling about how I feel. So healing is about what you add, not just about what you eliminate. The goal isn't food fear. It's about nourishment, consistency, and learning what works best for your body. Any questions? I want to open it up for questions, and feel free to connect with me. I'm Genny Mack across all platforms. And yeah, I'll stop sharing.
We do have one. So it says, "What sugars are anti-inflammatory, and is it and are healthy for me to eat? Like to add I think gluten-free oatmeal and protein. Oh, to add to gluten-free oatmeal and protein balls."
Yeah, that's a very good question. So with autoimmune conditions, typically we have responses to sugar consumption, right? And even with basic sort of whole foods that are high in sugar, we might actually still have a reaction to them. So this is where it's important to understand your blood sugar response. Again, going back to testing your comprehensive metabolic panel, your A1C, and that will give you an insight into how your body digests and breaks down sugar. So that's just sort of the baseline first. And then in terms of what sugars I would recommend eating first, then you will determine if you can eat sugars with a moderate glycemic index versus a low. So banana versus blueberries. Right, you might have different reactions to those different sugars. But if you're looking for a direct sugar substitute, coconut sugar has a lower glycemic index than regular table sugar. You can also use dates. So you can chop up a whole dates, and that includes a good source of fiber to sweeten your oatmeal and your protein balls.
That's such a great idea. I think I'm going to do that because I actually love dates. That wasn't even my
Yes.
question.
Mm-hmm. You're
This is
welcome.
Yeah, this is one from that someone had sent in, and you kind of talked a little bit about like different foods take a different amount of time to digest and like that timeline. So,
Hmm.
how soon after someone eats something will they notice inflammation?
That is a great question. So, this also goes back to whether you have an allergy or a sensitivity to food. If you have a food allergy, you might have an immediate reaction, right? Histamine reaction, right? You start swelling, your eyes swelling, you start itching, you might need some kind of medical intervention, right? So that can be an allergic reaction to food, and that can almost happen immediately.
Okay.
However, for food sensitivities and intolerances, this can take hours, it can take 2 days, it can even take 3 days. Again, depending on the food and the digestive system fire, it could take some time for your body to respond. So, this is why it's very important during your healing process to write it all down, right? And that's where you'll start to learn insights or track it in the Folia Health app, right? To say, if I've eaten this kind of food, I kind of feel sluggish, and that could be for types of grains, or a nut specifically, you feel itchy. So yeah, that's why it's very important to track and monitor your food consumption, because it could be an immediate reaction if you have an allergy, or it can take some hours or days if you have a sensitivity or intolerance.
Okay.
Hmm.
So knowing that it can take a while, how long should someone give for any new thing they're trying with the diet? Like how
Mm.
long should they give it before they decide if it's for them or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always tell my community to give it a week and see.
Okay.
So, generally speaking, if you follow the same way of eating for a good 3 or 4 days, that can give you an indication of the reaction of that food to your body, right? So, 3 or 4 days eating the same meal, that can give you an indication as to whether that feels good or it doesn't. So, I just say a week is a good enough time to see whether that food gives a reaction to your body. But if you want to continue that journey, give it 30 days, right? If you feel good with that way of eating, keep going. Give it 30 days, give it 60 days. It could take anywhere from a month to 3 months for someone to be able to turn around their health with their eating ways.
Okay. Okay.
Hmm.
Helpful. Um, Here's another one that came in. Do pickles count for as a fermented food?
Oh, I like this question. I saw it come in too. So, pickled food versus fermented food are different categories of food. A pickle is actually a cucumber, right? And a cucumber is pickled by using vinegar as a baseline, to give it a tangy and a sour taste. So, pickling food isn't the same as fermenting foods, but if you wanted to ferment cucumbers, you could. You would just add a water and a salt fermentation base, and then you allow it to go through the natural fermentation process to allow the bacteria to, um, sort of create and grow lactic acid, which is your good gut bacteria. So, yeah, there's a big difference between pickling and fermenting. Pickling can actually be tricky with someone that has autoimmune conditions and digestive and gut health issues, because it can be acidic. So, you just want to be careful for that.
Okay, that's good to
Hmm.
know. Here's another one. So, is it true that seed oils are toxic and especially bad for people with autoimmune conditions?
Okay. So, sesame seeds, sesames are seeds. Okay. And if you think about sesame oil, it's not necessarily a category of bad oils. So I think this is where the internet sort of instills fear in a category of foods without actually explaining the impact of that food on our body. What we should know about oils in general is, again, the origination of the food to create that oil. what kind of food was sort of processed to extract that oil? Was it a food that has been was it a food that has been genetically modified, such as corn, right? Soybean, those are high process sort of commodities in our society, cheap, and they're sprayed with pesticides. So we're getting the byproduct of them with the processing of the oil. Also, when you process oils at high temperatures, it extracts a compound called hexane, which is toxic to the body, right? Which is an endocrine disruptor. It disrupts the hormones. So that's also something to be mindful of. And the last thing with oils is that we want to consume oils that are anti-inflammatory. And oils, and generally speaking, oils can have more saturated fat, which can be inflammatory. So oils have more compounds of omega-6. You probably have heard about that versus omega-3. So we want to prioritize consuming oils that have more omega-3 anti-inflammatory compounds, antioxidant compounds. So your cold press olive oils are going to be good. Your cold press sesame oils are going to be helpful. Cold press flaxseed oil is also, could be helpful depending on the person's needs with balancing their estrogen levels. So again, it's really about understanding the processing and the origination of food, and then how that food impacts our body.
Gotcha. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know that about the oils. That's so fascinating.
Yep.
Um, and I think this was actually someone who's here today, and they would love any direction that you have on how to not feel like they're starving in the evenings.
Mm. Yeah, I am sort of talking about this concept of stop starving and start nourishing, because, again, that kind of goes back to this fear of food and just being triggered by all of this information out there, and misinformation telling us that healthy food is even bad for us, right? So I think it's all about sort of getting some support around developing a healthier relationship with food, and that takes time, right? So I would just start with that baseline. And then this concept of being hungry at night, right? That goes back to understanding the impact of your blood sugar, right? There's a lot there where you're getting sort of those hunger cues, that could be tied to some imbalances in your gut. If you have overgrowth, sort of bacteria, candida, for example, can also trigger your body to crave more sugars, for example. So, yeah, it's really about understanding your blood sugar impact, managing that. And if you need a snack at night, go for a healthy snack, right? When I say healthy, maybe that's an apple that is going to help with the satiated feeling. It's has a good source of fiber. And again, these are foods based on general foods, not knowing if you have an allergy to the foods or not, right? Maybe a handful of pumpkin seeds can help. So just thinking about eating whole foods, knowing it's okay to eat if you're hungry, but also understanding your blood sugar impact is very key.
Okay, that's good to
Hmm.
know. Yeah. And then I think we have time for one more. So this person says they've been on the anti-inflammatory diet for almost a year, and they continue to have they continue to have whole body inflammation,
Mm.
and so they're curious what else they could consider.
Yeah, I would say definitely speak with, if you haven't already, speak with a nutritionist or a dietitian. Very key. And if you're going the natural route, a functional medicine or naturopath, or holistic nutritionist would be my recommendation. I would start there. But again, anti-inflammatory foods, right? That's a coin term. It really is about identifying those allergies or those trigger foods, because even those healthy categories of foods can be triggering if your body doesn't have the digestibility to break them down. Um, And then yeah, it's I would say it's kind of hard to pinpoint otherwise because it does require an individualized approach.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Hmm.
such a good reminder.
Yeah.
And I know we're pretty much at our time here, and some people did send through some questions about kidneys and diet, kidney health, and
Mm.
dialysis. We actually are doing a renal nutrition workshop later this month, so we'll make sure to just include that in our follow-up for anyone who that's applicable to, because we can kind of get into some more of the kidney stuff since we're short on time. We had too much good information to share today. But Jenny, thank you so much for all of that insight. It was so helpful and so informative. And thank you everyone for joining us today. And again, we will send through a follow-up email with this recording. We'll make sure to include Jenny's information if you want to get in touch with her. And then also let us know if you have any questions about Folia. So thank you all so much.
Yes, thank you for having me tonight. I hope this was helpful, and I hope to see you again soon.
Wonderful. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.